light on yet. So there it is. All right. I have a quorum. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm calling this special meeting of the City Council to order for the purpose of conducting a housing affordability workshop. I would like to ask the city clerk to please call the roll.
Mayor Constantine?
Here.
Council members Borgioli?
Here.
Spring?
Here.
Martinez Beltran?
Here.
McKay?
Here. And could you please declare the posting of tonight's agenda?
Tonight's meeting agenda was duly noticed and posted in accordance with Government Code 54954.2.
Great, thank you very much. And as I said, that we are calling this meeting to order for a workshop. And at this time, I will hand this over to our Assistant City Manager, Edith Ramirez.
Good evening, council and teammates. Today, we're going to have a workshop on housing and affordability. And this is part of a series of workshops we've been having for the last 2 months. And this is one to the last workshop. We're going to meet again next on the 23rd to talk about infrastructure and sustainability. Today, the focus is going to be, and we're going to try to stay within this frame of affordability. And with that, Rebecca Garcia, our housing manager, is going to get us started, but we have the rest of the team here. Her team, Julius from House Keys, Christy from the housing department, as well as Jennifer Carmen, our development services director, is here to engage with this conversation. We are going to ask, we have a lot of data as always to present, a lot of information. We're going to ask you to hold off questions. Maybe you can write them down on the side, and then we hold off questions to the end of the presentation. With that, Rebecca?
Good evening, council. Good evening, teammates. Just give me one moment to screen share here. All right. Okay, as Edith mentioned, we have lots of housing conversations going on throughout the month of May and June. We've covered all things housing, state mandates for housing production, how to create inclusive communities through design. We've had a session on what is affordable housing in Spanish. We've had a good discussion on agricultural workforce housing. And today, as Edith mentioned, we're focusing on affordability. And in June, we will end with long-term sustainability and housing. All of our conversations are recorded and on our Housing Conversation website. Before we get started, it is my pleasure to ground us in the mission. We reiterate this to the council and the community over and over, but this is really what feeds all of our work. Our goal and our mission is to improve, preserve, and create safe, quality rental and ownership housing in Morgan Hill for residents at all income levels. A big part of our work plan is implementation of the housing element as part of our general plan, demonstrating how our community will meet the existing and projected future housing needs. And then, of course, we need to demonstrate the city's ability to provide for its fair share of affordable housing, comply with and support social justice and anti-discrimination housing practices, and to support those who currently find themselves homeless. Who is affordable housing for? This is one of my favorite slides, and I hope it conveys to you it is for many of us. It is for our residents, it is for our youth, our aging population, our parents. It is certainly for our workforce, our service providers that take care of all of us. And it is also for people with special needs. And I know many of you have heard the story of people who've lived here for 40, 50 years, who now have adult children who are moving out of the area because they are priced out. So it is also for those of us who have parents who've been here for a long time, but we are priced out of the Bay Area. Our housing programs consist of a broad range of services. As Edith mentioned, we have Jennifer here with us today. We have Christy and Julius with House Keys. They are the backbone to our housing program. The city has a BMR program for ownership and rental administered by House Keys. We have an inclusionary housing ordinance, which is a policy that produces those units. We offer support and work to house our unhoused neighbors. We participate with the county and some of the other smaller jurisdictions to be part of the Community Development Block Grant Program, which allows our community-based organizations and nonprofit developers to receive funding. We also, on a limited basis, issue down payment loans when our begin loans are repaid back to us. We call that reuse money. We reuse it to do the same thing and give down payment assistance loans. Through the CDBG program that I mentioned and Rebuilding Together, we have a home repair program for seniors and folks with special needs that fall under the low income categories. And then, to the best of our ability, as capacity allows, policy and advocacy at the regional and state level. Affordable opportunities exist both in ownership and in rental communities. What is considered affordable? Well, generally speaking, the household is going to pay a reduced price. That sounds kind of obvious, but that's the first thing. Regardless of whether it's a mortgage they're paying or rent, they're going to pay a reduced price. Generally speaking, it would consume no more than approximately 30% of a household's gross monthly income, including utilities. That's primarily for rental. If we're talking about ownership, it does go up a little bit to about 35%. And then another indicator, if it's an affordable community, if they're asking you for income qualification, and if there's a waiting list, those are all the indicators that it is an affordable community. Who and what determines eligibility? Each year, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and the State Housing and Community Development Department annually releases income limits that determines eligibility. Through this process, our Santa Clara County area median income is determined each year. What does the area median income AMI mean, and why does it matter if you're wondering if you're eligible for one of these homes? Well, it's important because while eligibility criteria is based on a variety of factors, the primary factor that determines eligibility is your household income, which is based on the area median income. The AMI is essentially the midpoint of a county's income distribution. So half of us earn more than the median and half of us earn less than the median income. As you all are aware, the County of Santa Clara has one of the highest area median incomes in the country. For example, a family of four the AMI is $151,300. This has continued to rise for us each year. An important point to remember throughout this conversation is it all depends on the number you want to use depends on how many people are in your household. So this is just one example for a family of four, but as the number of people in your household changes, that number changes as well. Income categories, when we're talking about moderate, are broken up into 4 different tiers. And we talk about those who fall at the 0 to 30% of the area median income fall into the extremely low income tier. And then we go up a little bit. Those who fall into the 30 to 50% AMI, we call that the very low income tier. Those who fall into the low income category, it's 50 to 80% of the AMI. And then moderate income is 80 to 120% of the AMI. And we'll translate that into incomes in just a second. So for a minute, I'd like to stay on the topic of rental affordable housing. Who is it for and how do you access it? Well, again, your rent, which is to include utilities, is about 30% or less than your household income. And again, eligibility is based on household size. Well, how does one determine if you're eligible? So when we're talking about affordable rentals, these numbers are highlighted here because these are the incomes that are targeted for affordable rental communities. So rentals serve 80% and below of the area median income. So just for example, you pretend I am one single person and my income is around $34,000 a year. I'm going to fall into that extremely low income tier. If I am around $58,000 a year and I'm one person, that's in the very low income tier. If I earn about $82,000 a year, I'm in the low income tier. So I'm going to repeat this because I think it's mind blowing. $82,000 a year, $82,450 to be exact, but I like to say 82,000. You are low income. $82,000 a year, you are low income in Santa Clara County. So I just say that so that we can really embrace the fact that, wow, this is a lot of people in our community, in our county, in our state. Another example, family of four, earning around $117,000, low income. Family of three, $74,000 a year, very low income. So there's 2 questions you want to ask yourself if you're looking for a rental affordable community. Number 1, how many people are in your home? Number 2, what is your combined income? And then see where you fit within this income chart. How much rent would someone pay in an affordable rental community? Well, because it ranges from 0 to 80% of the AMI, it will range from almost $800 to about $2,400 a month. $2,400 a month doesn't sound like it's very affordable, but believe it or not, it is for a 4-bedroom. And again, it's based on bedroom count. For a 4-bedroom in this county, that actually is more affordable than what the private market would offer. Again, affordable rentals focus from 0 to 80% of the area median income. A few more examples: if you make up to $117,000 for a 4-person family, and up to $82,000 for a 1-person family, 1-person household, you could qualify for affordable rental housing. Important and a challenge that we face is 51% of our rental households spend over 30% on rent, which means they are rent burdened and spending less on other basic necessities, healthcare, the economy. The percentages are higher for households in the lower income tiers. So, for example, 69% of all households that earn under $50,000 per year are rent burdened. How do you access our affordable rental opportunities? Well, the first thing you want to do is go to our city housing website. You could literally just Google City of Morgan Hill housing website, and then look for the housing resource guide. Christy keeps it up to the top of the page. This is a document that we use a lot and we share with a lot of folks. It lists every single affordable community and market rate, actually. And so you want to call the property manager and ask questions. Is there an apartment available? Is there a waiting list? And if the waiting list is actually open, you definitely want to apply if you think that you might possibly be eligible. If there's no apartment or the wait list is not open, then I would encourage you to continue to try again later. And also important to note, they have to have your updated contact information. It's your responsibility to make sure that every property manager has that where you're interested in living. If they don't, they will go to the next household. Okay, moving on to ownership, because it is a little bit different, although it is affordable. Who is it for and how do you access it? So this is the same income chart that everybody uses. But when we're talking about affordable ownership programs, we're targeting an affordable category, but it is the moderate affordable category. So this is higher incomes, and it serves 80 to 120% of the AMI. So just a few examples: if my family is a family of 4 and we're earning about $180,000, it's likely that we would be eligible for a below market rate affordable ownership home. If I'm 1 person and I'm around 127,000, also it's likely that we would be eligible for an affordable ownership home. Okay, what are the sales prices of our BMR ownership homes? And I should mention the term BMR is used interchangeably for rent and ownership. I have the habit of using it more for ownership, but it is also used in the affordable community as well. So our sales prices on our ownership homes range from about $512,000 for a 1-bedroom to about $704,000 for a 4-bedroom. But I would say the majority of our BMRs tend to be 2s and 3s. So that's $581,000 for the 2-bedroom, $651,000 for the 3-bedroom. How would one access our ownership opportunities? Well, we have an administrator called House Keys. They administrate alongside cities and builders to provide affordable housing opportunities to income eligible households. They have a website. It's visithousekeys1.com. Or I'm sorry, the website is just housekeys1.com. Then you want to go to the events calendar page. Then you want to sign up for the next available FAQ Friday or Saturday information session. And that's important. That's really the first step. That's where you're going to learn all of the nuts and bolts and details and requirements and rules. It's a wonderful program. There are a lot of steps. House Keys will walk you through those steps. And you want to register your profile at myhousekeys.com so they can continue to communicate with you. I do want to take one moment to acknowledge Julius and House Keys. So for those of you who don't know, Julius is just as much an economic development story as a housing story in Morgan Hill. He started with just 3 employees in Morgan Hill about 6 years ago. Although, to back up even more, he's been working with Morgan Hill City for 12 years. But he started his own official business in the city of Morgan Hill about 6 years ago when Neighborhood Housing Services went out of business. And I had just started with the city and we were in dire need of a BMR administrator that had the depth and could handle the complexities of a 40-year-old program that had changed over the years, and also do it with compassion and integrity. And we were his first city. And he now has 19 employees, and he now has 10 cities that he operates this program for. And so really proud of him and really proud of Morgan Hill for being the first to invest in such incredible talent. I know for me, the reason that I'm able to stay engaged in the regional conversations is because Christy and Julius are here at home, making sure that things go smoothly. So, and thank you, Julius, for choosing to have your headquarters in the city of Morgan Hill. And I hope that you continue to do so. It's really been a wonderful partnership. Okay, how do we create affordable homes? Well, there's things we need to do. We need to build more housing. We need to diversify that. So we don't need to just build more housing, but we also need to diversify the housing types that we build. We have predominantly, been single family residential for quite some time. I think nearly 80% is single family. And as we embark on this housing element process, we need to think about other forms of housing, other types of designs, right? Smaller housing units, accessory dwelling units, rentals is part of that conversation, income restricted housing, which we already do, and supportive housing. So what is supportive housing? So there's a couple different ways we as a city obtain affordable housing. One of these ways is a product called supportive housing. This is a type of housing that is for people who are at the lower end of the income, but generally speaking, earn 30 to 60% of the area median income. With that said, many of them are at the 30%. Supportive housing is administered by the county. It's for people who were once homeless or at risk of homelessness. These apartments have subsidies that do cover a percentage of the monthly rent. So someone living in a supportive housing apartment may have a subsidy or a voucher, we call them too, from the housing authority. They could also have a voucher from the Veterans Administration, or they could have a subsidy and voucher. I'm using those words interchangeably as well, but they could also have one from the County of Santa Clara. Tenants pay a total of 1/3 of their income. Another way that we receive affordable apartment communities is low-income housing apartments. These ones are open to the public to apply. I should back up and say when it's a supportive housing project, typically the tenants are being referred directly by the county. We do our best to make sure that our unhoused neighbors end up in this county system, but the referral is coming from the county. Low-income housing apartments is a little bit different in that it's generally open to the public. The incomes that we're targeting here are a little bit higher. So when you heard me say over and over, 82,000 is low income, 82,000 is low income, this is where we would target. These are the people we would target. So the price of housing is certainly less expensive than the cost of the private market, but it's still not necessarily deeply affordable. There's no permanent source of financial assistance that's going to pay the portion of someone's rent. They are going to pay that themselves usually. With that said, if someone had a Section 8 voucher and went here, they could use it there because you can use your Section 8 voucher anywhere. Typically, this type of project is built by nonprofit developers using the state's California tax credit and bond program. An example of what a 2-bedroom apartment would rent for is about $1,700 to $2,042. Another way we receive affordable units is through our own policy, our city inclusionary housing ordinance. What this program does is require that 10% of all new residential development that is located within downtown be affordable at lower prices, whether it's rental or ownership. And the same is true for outside of the downtown, but outside of the downtown, we require 15%. If a developer does not build the unit on site, they can also pay a fee in lieu of providing that below market rate unit within the project. And then what would we do with that fee? We would accept it, and we would go work with a nonprofit developer to leverage those dollars and build deeper affordable units. Another really important tool, and this is really how most affordable units throughout the country are produced, it's the California Low Income Housing Tax Credit Program. This is really facilitates the investment of private capital into the development of affordable units, rental for low income. The Tax Credit Allocation Committee annually allocates federal and state tax credits to the developers of these projects. And essentially what happens is the corporations that provide the developer the equity to actually build the project in return receives a tax credit. So again, important program, and this is really how the majority of affordable units throughout the state and the country are built. Who helps us as a city build and fund affordable housing? Well, we have lots of partners. First and foremost, nonprofit affordable housing developers, but certainly our market rate developers as well through our inclusionary program. The County of Santa Clara has taken a really active role in the past 6+ years in building affordable units. The state low-income housing program I just mentioned, and also the Housing Authority of the County of Santa Clara is also a big player. They manage the Section 8 Housing Authority program on behalf of every city in the county. And they also act as a developer as well. I'm going to turn it over to Jen to talk a little bit about inventory.
There we go. Thank you, Rebecca. So looking at the inventory that we currently have of affordable housing in Morgan Hill, we are one of the most productive communities in California with a per capita rate of 1 in 8 homes in the city is deed restricted affordable housing. And this is something that I don't think a lot of cities can actually say. We are small in comparison to a lot of cities in California, but our ratio is one of the highest. Next slide, please. So in looking at how housing gets regulated by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, which is also referred to a lot by staff as HCD, they play a major role in the process communities follow to plan for housing that houses all of our community. And namely, for us, they're focused on the housing element and the implementation of the housing element. The housing element is part of our general plan, which is the guiding document for how the city will function and has goals and policies of all different types and all different subject areas. The housing element is a special element of the general plan and is required to be updated on a much more regular basis than the rest of the general plan. HCD governs the certification of that document, which will demonstrate how the community will meet existing and projected needs. They also run the oversight of the implementation of the element, as well as enforcement and compliance. They, with all the new housing laws that have passed, which we talked about during the last cycle, they now have a robust section of this department that is simply dedicated to auditing cities and enforcement. They also oversee the regional housing need allocation. And this is the process by which the state determines how many housing units need to be built over the housing cycle, which we'll talk about the next slide. And how those numbers are given to the metropolitan planning organizations, which in the case of our area is ABAG and MTC. And those numbers are then distributed to counties and cities. We're currently in our 5th housing cycle, and this runs until January of 2023. So our current housing element, the strategy there has been focused on building housing that meets the full range of community needs and ensuring that we have a diverse amount of housing types for all age groups that are served by transit, recreational amenities, shopping, all the community services that allow residents to age in place, and also a focus on preserving and rehabilitating existing affordable housing. Our next housing element is due for certification by January of 2023. And we currently have in this cycle a deficit of 193 very low income units. And in order to count for this cycle, building permits must be issued by December of 2022. We've exceeded all other income categories, and there are currently 6 separate rental affordable projects that could yield those 193 units. However, we do not know at this point whether or not the exact timing of those building permits will be completed in this cycle, but we are tracking that very closely. We do have an update on all of our significant projects on our development projects page. Web link is here. And we bring a quarterly update on all of our projects to City Council just to provide updated information on when we think things are actually going to start moving. So getting back to our RENA process, we talked about how the numbers are given out, and there's a methodology that is developed through ABAG MTC. The City of Morgan Hill was very fortunate during this cycle's methodology committee work to hold a seat as an alternate on the committee, and really be engaged on what was the formula that would be adopted that would apply to every city in the Bay Area that distributed that overall number. The city was very concerned that there would be a flat distribution of that number. And if anyone has watched some of the meetings that we've had over the last 2 years, we were prepping for a number that would be around between 2,000 and 3,000 units. This methodology and the HCD recently accepted the methodology is focused on cities that have jobs and transit. And that is where most of the numbers went. So our actual RENA number is very similar to what we have in this current cycle. Next slide, please. So right now, our current cycle's RENA assignment is 928 units. For the next cycle, we're looking at 1,037. And that is a very reasonable number that we do believe that we can achieve in the housing element, the housing element update that's moving forward. It's very important to note that a large percentage of this current cycle's numbers are dedicated to low, very low, and extremely low housing. And that is a major focus to HCD has called it the catch-up provision because production has been so low across the state over the last few housing cycles. Next slide, please. One of the large parts of our housing element work will be to assess the fair housing, and what this program is called is affirmatively furthering fair housing. And this process is directly tied to the work that the city is doing as far as diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And we're going to be looking at the housing sites inventory that's a major part of the housing element and include goals, policies, and programs that combat discrimination and overcome patterns of segregation and foster inclusive communities. Back to Rebecca.
Thank you, Jennifer. Just a quick overview of some of our current efforts. We partner with the County of Santa Clara and the development community as much as we can to produce affordable homes. We actively set aside units for our unhoused neighbors. I do believe that is what helps keep our homeless numbers down. Programmatically, we do strive to reach our RENA goals in each income category. The City Council endorsed the community plan to end homelessness back in December of last year. And what that plan was a very high level plan that talks about different strategies to combating and ending homelessness, both from temporary solutions to long-term permanent solutions. I'm very happy to say, as the council was aware, we came to you on June 2nd to accept a grant from Destination Home. The purpose of that grant was to take that high-level community plan and really bring it down to reality and develop and implement a local implementation plan. And so we're getting ready to start that work. Part of the grant will also be, or the majority of the grant is also used to hire a homeless specialist, a full-time person who will be on the ground working directly with our unhoused community members. That's not something we've had in the past, and I really do think it's a game changer. So I'm super excited to bring that person on board. Okay, some takeaways from this workshop. Affordable housing is for the benefit of all of our families and does support everyday heroes. The first one that comes to mind is veterans. Many of them do live in affordable housing. Secondly, the state requires cities to build housing that is affordable. And we haven't talked about it this way a lot, but really meeting our city goals in each income category is directly correlated to retaining local control, which we know is something really important to the council. So we believe the more energy we focus on meeting these goals is how we are in the long run going to be able to retain some local control. Third, building affordable housing is really, it's necessary to be inclusive and to meet the needs of all of our community members. Creating affordable housing by design and just being mindful about how we design our buildings and different housing types, smaller homes, rental product is an important part of the conversation. And then lastly, you know, although we're thrilled that we have 6 affordable projects in the development pipeline, some of them require the state tax credit bond financing program, which is extremely competitive. And I have no doubt that they will at some point go through that process successfully. But the timing, it's an arduous process. And every affordable community that gets built, especially rental, is a miracle. So no doubt they're going to get built, but you know, the timing is, we're watching it closely, but it's just a really competitive program. And as Edith mentioned at the beginning of the workshop, June 23rd, we are going to have the next workshop on housing and long-term sustainability. You'll have an opportunity to hear from all of the departments on what the impacts are to each of their work programs. I will stop share screening there, and we are happy to answer any questions.
I have a few, if I may.
Sure, jump right in.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Thank you all for presenting again. This is a complex topic, as we all know, but also kind of a mind-boggling topic. And ever since I used to be a planning commissioner, I struggle with the term affordable that we use in this context here. Most people I know of, whether they're mail carriers, work in grocery stores for the city, as teachers and so on, they don't have even near the wages, right, that we deem to be within the category of affordable. So it even seems that a lot of techies also are in that category when you look at those income levels. And so I just wonder if there ever has been a discussion about changing the terms to something more appropriate. I find it insulting to call someone, well, you're a low income earner when you have such a decent job, right? Like many do. And then you say, well, you're a low income. That's insulting. And then if you grew up in an environment like I did, where low income was reality, right? You don't, but everyone works in your household, then that's not a term that is well received. And I really wonder why we continue using these kinds of terms that then also very often associate, you know, well, very low income or low income housing with what some associate with the hood and projects and which they are not intended to be and not meant to be. And so I just wonder if there has been a discussion, Rebecca, you might maybe know, about changing these terms and making them more appropriate and more,
I think it's
tied to what people relate to.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, and I welcome the team's feedback as well. It's something I've been in this work for 16 years, and I've struggled with the word too, because it's hard to get folks to relate to the fact that this is really a conversation about most of us. I haven't come up with a better word than affordable, but where I'm putting my energy is helping the community and everyone understand that the word low income isn't a bad word. It's just, we're in Santa Clara County and it's incredibly expensive here. So, you know, we're off the charts. So there hasn't been any talk about changing the terms. It's really more about changing the community's perception about what those terms mean. And team, feel free to add anything, but.
Yeah, and that probably might be a losing struggle because there is a lot of negativity associated with low and very low income, no matter how we twist it, right? And so maybe food for thought. Mm-hmm. But in that context, as you rightly so said, includes probably a big chunk of people around us that fall into these category below market rate. Are there any preferences given to people who live, work here already when it comes to applying for rental or housing?
There is in our below market rate ownership program, and Julius, feel free to add, but this is a common question among many cities. And we do give preference in our ownership program for those who live or work in Morgan Hill. And if there isn't someone that meets that category when the new construction unit is ready to go or the resale, then we move on to the next qualified buyer.
Yeah, just wanted to point out too that one of the challenges with affirmatively furthering fair housing is that they're challenging local preferences for all cities based on their demographics, or if there's any challenge there, HUD is definitely pushing back on cities that are trying to put together local preference. So we always have to be mindful of just how this regulatory landscape keeps changing on us, especially as we're trying to do a good thing, but the feds look at things nationally and not locally. So it's always tough for them to discern that way.
Right. The context is clear, right? When you think of people wanting to downsize, right? They can't because they're just priced out. Or younger people that still live at home or would like to have their own home, they just can't. They can't do it because we have nothing that they even remotely could afford, even though we call it affordable. So that's a challenge, and I don't have good answers yet. We've had the challenge for a long time. But Rebecca, speaking of challenges, I really want to challenge you on your statement too. You say, you made a statement, as long as we meet the RENA numbers or exceed, chances are we're getting local control back. I don't share your positive assessment of that. There's a new bill already floating around in Sacramento that plans to extend SB 330 by another 5 years and likely will pass. They don't care about our numbers, what we meet or don't meet. And in most categories, but by far we exceed the numbers. We're one of the fastest growing cities in the area, but we don't get credit for providing that housing. So there's a disconnect in that thinking somewhere that cities that provide beyond the RENA number housing, they don't get credit or benefit for anything.
Yeah, I mean, I can't predict what the legislation is going to be in the future, but under the Housing Accountability Act, one of the criteria that we can look at as to whether or not we can impose conditions or deny housing projects is whether we've met our RENA numbers in all categories. Once we've met our RENA numbers in all categories, we have a lot more control. We don't have total control, but we have a lot more control under the Housing Accountability Act, which is part of what SB 330 was amending.
We would also be exempt from SB 35, and that was something during the last workshop that all the council members said was very important. And that's the ministerial with no CEQA housing law. And that's something that we're very concerned about as well.
Right, but there again, and I'm sure you look at that too, all those crazy bills coming and being discussed in Sacramento as we speak these days. They limit even more local control when it comes to parking and so on. And I have no problem with providing that kind of housing, but what is puzzling to me is there's not going to be parking. The cities are not getting any money to provide the infrastructure. Transportation is not improving. It's not balanced, that approach, right? So if you demand cities to provide more housing, any category, then the state also in the same should also help those cities and say, hey, if you meet this, we'll give you that kind of money to maintain your infrastructure. Why are we avoiding these kinds of talks and just let them do whatever they want to do up there in Sacramento?
I'll push back on that. We're not just letting Sacramento do what Sacramento's going to do. I feel your frustration, but Renee, you're preaching to the choir. We are all singing from the same hymn. We all agree with what you're saying, and we have fought. The last housing workshop, I brought up the example of when SB 330 was actually moving through the House and the Senate, going up to the governor's desk. We actually, Leslie, Rebecca, I don't know if Edith went up there, but please feel free to fill in whoever else went up to Sacramento, made multiple calls, and actually had amendments put in the bill that I said could have been, you could have titled it Morgan Hill Amendment, because it was our work that went into those amendments to change those things, to make it more palatable. Now, when it went to the governor's desk, the governor vetoed it and took that all away. So it's not that we're not doing anything, we are, but we also have to understand the reality that we're in, is that once things are put into law, we have to abide by them, whether we agree with them or not. And it's almost like you have to make lemons out of lemonade. You know, we just have to do the best we can. I completely agree with you. The future looks bleak as far as what we can do and what is coming down the pipe. You know, you mentioned the fact that there's a bill that could allow a project to be built with no parking. That's ridiculous. But to say that we're not doing anything and we're not speaking up is not correct. All I can say is we're a small fish. I wish our voices were a little bit more loud, but it's like a mouse in New York City screaming with all the buses and trains going. But I feel your frustration. Your frustration is felt by the team as well. And our team works very hard to make sure that we can do what we try and massage bills as best we can. The League California Cities does the same thing. And also the Santa Clara County City Association that I sit on. You know, we have written letters opposing certain bills, but that's unfortunately really all that we can do until we can get someone to listen. It would be great if the state would have looked at our growth control measure and used that as a model, because as Jennifer stated earlier on in the presentation, I like to use a little bit stronger wording. I think she uses the legalese just in case somebody else is ahead of us. But we have more below market rate housing than any city in Northern California. And for a city our size, that is sad. But think about what would happen if the state adopted our growth control. Cities throughout California would have more affordable housing and be able to house the people that can't afford it. And I agree with you also too, that the nomenclature about what's affordable and what's not affordable. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, what you can get here versus anywhere else in the country is mind-blowing. And I'm going on my soapbox a little bit, but it's frustrating for all of us to see what's coming down the pipe. But our partnership with House Keys was one of the things that really allow us to be the leader in affordable housing. But we need to do more. We all need to do more. But it's to say that we're not doing as much as we can. There's always more to be done. But we're trying our best. We really are.
Yeah, well, maybe trying the best and still not good enough. Obviously, we're not getting anywhere. I know you disagree with me on that one, but just.
No, I agree with you. We're not getting anywhere. I agree with you.
So obviously our approach is not working. So where are the new approaches? And I think we have to start thinking outside the box. And I don't know, it can be legal action, it can be other actions, but whatever we do is not working. We are not being heard. That is clear to me.
Well, we're by far not the only ones. I can tell you that. By attending the meetings, not only with the California cities, but with the League of California Cities, but the Santa Clara County Association of Cities, we're all singing the same hymnal, and we all feel the same frustration.
Well, I
Go ahead
actually
and jump
agree.
in? I wanted to ask some questions, Rebecca, if I could.
I'll leave the other council
first-
person say it.
Good. All right.
Is Renee
Go ahead,
done?
Yvonne.
Sorry, I don't know. Were you still talking?
Go ahead, Yvonne.
Okay. I wanted to ask a couple of questions, changing gears a little bit, but first I will say to some of the comments that Councilmember Spring said, I really want to thank him for bringing that forward on the nomenclature that we use. And I agree that does need to change. Maybe we can even, start that conversation, because that in itself, I think is hurting us even getting off of the ground. We know what we're looking at and what we're facing, and we're going to be, I'm so glad that the staff has put together these opportunities for the community to ask their questions and understand, because This is the conversation that's happening in every corner of every city all throughout the state. And so, you know, I just want to make sure that people are understanding that things are changing here. And so this is really important. So thank you. Thank you for bringing all of that here. And thank you, Councilmember Spring, for your comments on that. I think it's very intuitive, and I think you're really looking forward to where we're going on both points. And I agree with you. You know, it is frustrating to have all of this happening in our community, and there really is nothing that any tools that we're given. We're given lots of requirements and lots of asks, but no support often, it feels like. And so we're trying to make all of these things happen on a shoestring budget, maximizing the talent, pushing everything from our staff. And it feels like a losing battle. So I too share your frustration. I will say that we've had some conversations recently, you know, with the League of Cities, and I sit on their Housing and Economic Development Policy Committee. I sit on their Transportation Committee, and we were having discussions about lots of legislature that was coming through. And I think it's ACA 7, you know, was one bill that they're looking at to try and bring local control, but there's not a lot of support other than the small cities who are looking to do that. And then there are lots of concerns with, what does that mean? Does that responsibility then just fall, you know, on us? And what happens to neighbors who aren't doing their part with the housing? So there's lots of questions. It didn't, you know, that really is still just kind of a conversation that's happening. But I just want to share with you that, you know, lots of other people are concerned about this as well. How do we get the carrots? Where do we get the money? Where do we get the funding for the infrastructure? Show it to us. Show us the way. I want to go back to some of the questions that I had. Was one thing that's come up, we've talked a lot about, is the ADUs. And I'm wondering, where do all ADUs fall in the same category? Do ADUs differ in which categories they fall in? Does it depend on what the makeup of the ADU is? How does that get figured out?
And if I may, council member, before we jump in to answer that question, I want to open up the floor to Julius, who's been patiently trying to provide some feedback. And I think that I'm so appreciative that he's here with us. I think we have so much that we can gain from his insight.
Let's have it, Julius.
Thank you. Sorry. So I just wanted to point out, because I think Councilmember Spring and even Yvonne, our Councilmember Bertrand, your comments sort of just really got me wanting to make 2 points. One, I think the reason why it's easy for the state to kick around cities is because there's 482 cities in California, and most of us are all doing something very different, in a different way, with a different organization, and there's not a lot of coordination or cooperation between the cities. And it's tough to do that because everybody has a different political body, a different, you know, voting block, voting groups. Now with districting, I mean, it's just a very different place to be as a city. But even though there's 482 cities, there's only 58 counties. And Santa Clara County has this unique opportunity because 6 of the 15 cities in the county are using house keys, and that combines all of your development activity with all of your application activity. So I know the city or the county's thinking about having some kind of doorway or regional effort, but only 9 more cities need to sign up for, and I'd give it away for free for the software component of house keys, just to be able to show to the state the first county that has a unified picture of what their affordable housing both need and production looks like. Nobody can produce that today and say, we've got, out of 2 million people in Santa Clara County, we've got 1 million people in the database that need X housing. Out of 15 cities in the county, we have this many development projects in our pipeline, and this many are going to meet our RENA numbers for the following cycle. Until a city can go to Sacramento and do that, you just are that mouse in New York City, as the mayor was saying, right? You know, making those noises and not being heard. But as soon as cities can realize that, wow, there's this resource that 6 other cities are using successfully to be able to create a unified voice around housing, not around any other topic, but really be able to focus on strength in numbers, strength in data, and be able to make a data-driven argument to Sacramento. It's very hard for the governor to look away because you're 1 in 58 counties at that stage, as opposed to 1 in 482 cities. So I just wanted to make that point as we're starting to think about what a different approach would look like. That's a very different approach in what we've had housing elements since 1969. I don't think any city has gone, any county has gone to the state with that level of coordination, having both demand and supply picture in one system in one database. And that's possible right now.
Just to piggyback on that, I love the example that you gave me recently, which is you may have 20 or 10 people show up to a council meeting and say, we don't want that particular type of housing, but you may, because we have data with house keys, you may have 1,000 people who live in the city and their incomes, and you're able to say, well, understood, but here's the need because we've collected the data. And so that's just really helpful to have.
And that's great. I really appreciate that, Julius. To challenge you a little bit, why couldn't we do that rather than waiting around for the other 9 cities is really what I'm getting at. Is there a way that we could work together with others like House Keys to get that information, because it is a situation of expediency for us?
Yeah, I don't think, you got 6 out of 15 now. I don't think you can try it with 6 out of 15, even if a few more, maybe you get the majority of the counties at 7, 8, and 9. And I think the thing that I'm saying is a little different is that it's not like we're coordinating, we're not having a meeting, right? People are signing up to put their information in the house key system every single night. They're saying, I need this kind of housing based on my household size, based on my total income, based on where I live, and based on where I work. So there's this kind of thing going on in the background every single night where builders are saying, hey, I've got this affordable housing agreement, I'm going to produce these units, and you've got people coming in with demand. I think there's a lot of efforts dispersed that cities are trying to, create some kind of picture. Right. But yeah, it could be that 2 or 3 more cities would sign up for a system like that and be able to present that argument. But yeah, you're right. That's a challenge we could try to meet before we get to 15 cities. And I just want to make one more point. In terms of affordable housing, I agree 100%. It's a misleading thing. Below market rate housing or affordable housing is a misleading term.
Right.
The term that I've been trying, and I don't have an exciting term, but in looking at how we calculate affordable prices, it's really income-driven pricing, as opposed to what people are selling on the market are comp-based pricing, right?
Right.
Rents are based on what can I rent, what can I get away with?
Right.
That's how real estate is sold today. What can I get away with selling this home for? What can I get away with renting this home for? As opposed to income-driven pricing, we're all getting the incomes from the county and from this federal government, and then we have to calculate those prices accordingly, regardless of whether 1 or 100% of the people in that county can afford it. That's kind of what we're stuck with, is it's income-driven pricing for both rents and sale prices.
Right. Which is kind of part of the problem, right? I mean, as long as you are in a house and it's working for the moment, but as soon as you've got that college age kid who's trying to stay in their same community, now it's an issue. Now you're thinking about it, but you're not thinking about it, before that. So I think it's changing the way that we all think, collectively. So guilty, we all are. But if I can get back to the ADUs, I'm interested to figure out, are they all the same category? Or do ADUs, do they vary? Do they fall in different categories depending on what type of ADU it is, where it is, what the lot is? How does that work? Are they extremely low, very low? We know that they're not, but.
Actually, Christy did a rent survey. We don't have a ton of ADUs in Morgan Hill, but we are starting to see more, whereas in the past we may have produced 6 a year. I think the most recent number I saw was 12. So it's definitely going up because the state has made it easier. But the rent survey that we did, they rent in the moderate income category. All of them.
And that's what they're accepted for our RENA reports. But the caveat to that is they do not count on our inclusionary housing. So if someone's trying, no, they do not, because they don't follow the policies of our inclusionary housing ordinance, being the same size as another unit or the smallest unit, and all of those other policies that we hold so dear. and what has made our income-based housing, I love that term, Julius, thank you.
Yeah.
As it's something that if people are driving through subdivisions, it looks just like every other housing unit. And that has been a goal of the program since inception.
Okay. And then when, can you talk about them being deed restricted or not? Does that have any weight on it?
If it was deed restricted, it could be deed restricted at very low income. It's not something we've done here. It would be an entirely new program, and we'd have to think about what it means to have a parcel that is owned by one person, but a rental in a deed restricted ADU, and then who manages and monitors that. I think so. It would be a whole new thing. I think if it was something the council really wanted us to explore, we'd have to spend some time thinking about what it would mean to do that.
And can you
And I
explain
would just add,
for the audience?
sorry, I was just going to add to Rebecca's answer that, and I am aware that there are cities that have tried deed restricted ADUs. I think we would have to give some very strong consideration to whether or not we can require a property owner to rent part of that person's property. That to me would be the difficult hurdle to overcome, is to require somebody, by purchasing a home, you now have to not only be a homeowner, but a landlord.
Well, it's also important to note that ADU law has changed over the years, and we used to be able to deed restrict ADUs to the property owner either lives in the primary house or the ADU. Those deed restrictions are no longer allowed, and you can rent out the ADU and the primary unit at the same time, creating a de facto duplex. And so now that you also can have more than one ADU, you can have a junior ADU and a standard ADU, it then raises some additional complications on how that happens, who controls what's happening in those units, who is the landlord, et cetera.
Okay. And the deed restriction, can you explain a little bit about that?
Dawn, back to you.
I mean, a deed restriction. So we, all of our affordable housing, except for some of our units that are moderate by design, is deed restricted. What deed restricted means is that for a certain period of time, the property can only be rented or sold at income restricted. What was, I can't remember the exact term, but that at below market. It has to be at an affordability level, one of, depending on
Income driven.
income. Yes, but it has to be maintained at that either rental or sale affordability level.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Gino.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I totally agree with Councilman Spring. He's just right on the money. I think what he's really asking is, is there anything else that we can do? And so let me frame it this way. I belong to a group called CALI. It's the California Association of Local Electeds. And it's a group about 300 people all around California. And over the last 2.5 months, we had Senator Wiener on the call and Senator Nielsen, Assembly Member Jesse Gabriel, and we shared many of the concerns that we're talking about. So, I think one of the things that Councilmember Spring is also trying to say, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, is we need to think outside the box and figure out a way on how we can get to our elected officials to let them know we have concerns in Morgan Hill about all these bills that are taking away our local control. And so like for tonight, possibly we could have got, a senator or an assembly person, to come and speak. This group that I belong to, there was SB 9 coming before the floor I think a week ago, Wednesday, and they gave a number and we all called in and we opposed it. And that portion of the bill got voted down because there was a lot of people who just opposed that bill and called in. You had to wait on the line for a long time. But, if we sit back and do nothing, nothing's going to get done. So maybe we can brainstorm either at the next housing session on how we can really figure out a way on how our voice as a city of Morgan Hill can get more heard to these people who sponsor these horrible bills. And I think Julius has some data that we can also support our and frame our concern. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I don't have any questions. I just wanted to, share my thoughts about what Councilmember Spring said. Thank you so much.
Mind if I jump in? So yeah, I agree with so much of what everybody's saying. It's there's the level of frustration is just palpable around the state. It's just I also belong in the Housing, Community, and Economic Development Committee, and I've attended all the meetings and have been able to speak. And at one meeting, I took the floor and told the story about the Morgan Hill exception to SB 330. The issue out there is that all these other cities are really screwing up, and we're paying the price for their bad behavior. And quite frankly, some of the stuff that's in those bills, I think works for some of those bigger cities, but it doesn't work for us. And that's why we have to continue to fight to make sure that we can actually get some specificity in these bills through amendments, through whatever changes we can prompt to then start to recognize the differences amongst our communities, because they're treating us all with a broad brush right now, and we're not the same. Okay, there's a great lack of equity in how we're being treated. And people are yelling from the rooftops, and our legislators, they hear us. They hear us constantly. So if there's a new approach, I would love to hear about it, because I sit on meetings with with mayors and council members from around the state on a regular basis, and there's no new method other than trying to get some of these legislators out of office and get them to understand where we're coming from. So anyway, the reason I say that is because I recognize that our staff has actually done an incredible job, and other cities are impressed by what our staff has done. So I want to continue to recognize the good work that our staff has done. And I have to admit, each one of us individually as council members, we're in there fighting too. Our legislators, they know our names. Okay, they hear from us. We have really good, heartfelt conversations. And I think they're listening to us, but again, their voices get drowned out. And so anyway, that's kind of the political side of things. It's just, we're in a really bad situation. And the worst part of it is that they're not taking really a hard look at affordability. Their solution at the state level is if you build enough homes, it floods the market and the price come down. Well, with up to 3.5 to 5 million, units shortage in homes in this state, that's going to be a long time before we reach the point where affordability comes down because of supply. So what happens, the state is not providing requirements for the affordability levels or income levels that we really need. We have to do it ourselves here at home. And so I think we're doing a fantastic job. So that was my soapbox. We're screaming, yelling, we're doing the best we can. I am open. If anybody comes up with an idea, I will take it to the next policy committee meeting. I will call senators, I will call assembly members. We should all do it. Let's keep on doing it. The reality is we're doing probably more than most communities, but that's because our community is different. Because we don't have transportation. We don't have the great jobs. We don't have all the stuff that all those other bills are based around. So we need to work on modifying those bills as they age, make them more appropriate for our community. Anyway, so one of the things that I know I worked on about 4 or 5 years ago, and we got started on, and I forget what stopped it, was affordable by design, and that includes small homes. And I kind of see a little smile from Rebecca, and maybe Jennifer was there, I can't remember, but we started a series of conversations that I would like to finish. What we found out through those conversations was, and I've said this at a meeting last week, if you go up and down the peninsula, most of those homes that were built in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they're all under 1,300 square feet. Now you had a garage now, that's another 400 square feet. So now you're talking about, 1,500 square feet. And these homes were fine. I grew up, I'm not any more compact. Well, I'm maybe shorter than most, but the house didn't restrict my growth in any way. We could still have those kind of homes right here because there's wonderful designs, beautiful homes, really great livable spaces that we could create in smaller homes. We had the discussion, and one of the first things that came up was, well, we can't do that because nobody will buy them and a developer won't build them. I had 2 developers say, let's do it. I'd love to build them. Well, then we ran into the issue of our zoning. Our own zoning wouldn't allow it because we don't allow small enough lots. So let's talk about that. Then the discussion was, what happens if we build them and they're so popular that now that price skyrockets? Well, let's talk about maintaining affordability, maybe deed restriction to some extent. But the fact of the matter is, as I get older, I might even want to move into one of those. I could live in a 1,300 square feet perfectly. And so the next issue, so I'm throwing that out. That's a challenge. Can we build it? Can we build courtyard developments? Can we build small homes on small lots? Can we give people that American dream in a smaller scale, but in a great setting like we have in Morgan Hill? I think we can do that. We have all the means. So that's a challenge. I'm throwing down the gauntlet. Let's do that. The next thing is, we have what can we do about people like me? And that is, I'm older. I bought a house. I have a big house. I bounce around this house. I love it. But there's a family out there that could use this house. There's 2 of us in this house right now, 2 dogs. They each got their own room. Okay, so what do we do about encouraging, incentivizing people that have the larger homes to downsize, move into something more affordable, something smaller, and let those families that are growing take the larger units? Now, is that a real issue, Rebecca, Edith, Jennifer? Is that a real issue? Is that just a perception of mine?
I think one of the issues, council member, is the way property taxes work. And that is one of the challenges that we see in people wanting to switch. So continuing to work on that for sure. Okay.
Anyway, just a thought, because I've heard that we've had that discussion. What can we do? How do we get families into the right size home instead of, packing them into smaller homes? But wait, I just said that those are fine. So I have to be careful what I say, right?
To your other point, council member, I think you brought up the basic point of, if we don't even have the product, because it's a product that we either have discouraged or has not been really part of our makeup, even if you wanted to, the product is not available for you. So creating that inventory of diverse product is key to allowing that movement.
And let's make that a part of our equity discussion moving forward. How do we create the homes for everybody? We talk so eloquently, so passionately about equity, and then we miss certain marks. Part of that is a home for everybody, for the children, for our children, for those that just want to live in this wonderful town we've created. Who doesn't want to live here? Many can't afford. And I actually just spoke with the new superintendent of schools who moved up from San Diego, who's now starting to look for a home. There's probably a bit of sticker shock going on right now. This is not the same as other parts. It's crazy here. And so that dialogue, how we talk about affordability, I agree with Councilmember Spring and the others. Yeah, we need to change the language around it, but quite frankly, it's true. Unfortunately, it's very true. It's amazing for a person like me who grew up, thought I made a decent wage. The last thing, do we know what the median rent is for an apartment right now? Do we have that locally?
Julius is looking through his computer right now. I think he's going to come up with a number, and Rebecca is looking. We'll see who's going to come up first.
Okay.
My money's on Julius. Julius, while you're looking for that, and I know you're going to find it, I'm reminded, we talked a little bit about our inclusionary housing ordinance, but I wanted to thank the council for some of your previous comments in the previous workshops and planning commission's previous recent comments. We started on this track of, okay, maybe we can modify our inclusionary housing ordinance to deepen the affordability a little bit to lower the sales prices, because we're noticing they're getting a little bit higher. But the conversation has evolved a little bit to say, well, we only have so many tools to reach our affordability goals. How do we maximize the use of the inclusionary housing ordinance to achieve some of those deeper affordable units? And so we started thinking it may be time to consider incentivizing either a hybrid type of program or fees, because the sooner we meet those very low income goals in the next RENA cycle, the sooner we won't be on, as we call it, the bad boy list. So anyhow, so we're thinking about that, and we'll return to council in August with that conversation.
Okay. So
Any luck, Julius?
So real quickly, while Julius is Googling this, could I ask a question? I believe is related. If not, I'll drop it. And that is that we're at 47,000 something population wise now, and we're moving very quickly into the 50,000 range, which means at that point we become an entitled city. How will that change the landscape for affordability for us? Will that benefit us? What will that do once we start to be able to get direct grants from the federal government and those kind of things?
One of the opportunities we might be able to benefit from is being a direct recipient of the community development block grant funds. Instead of, that would be a decision we would have to make, instead of being part of the joint powers agreement with the county. Currently the county receives the funding, and it goes to all of the smaller cities, community-based organizations, Law Foundation. So once we become an entitlement city, we will have that choice, but then we will also have to advocate to HUD that we have the ability to monitor that grant and administer it. So certainly that would be more funding to do a lot of things, affordability being one of them.
What it gives us is more flexibility in how we spend the money that we get. We probably would get the same amount of money, but we would have some more flexibility in how we spend it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. I know I sit on HACDAC, Housing Community Development Advisory Committee, and so we actually, figure out how we're going to split up those funds of the CDBG. And I guess one of the things that I see is that those funds are actually going mostly to nonprofits and shovel-ready projects. Will that open up the door for us to use the funds in other ways then?
We would have to make decisions about how that funding can be used. It's pretty flexible funding, but it would be an important conversation because the CBOs rely on that funding, even though it's 10,000, 20,000, 15,000. It's funding they've been getting for a very, very long time. So if we switch, we would have to have a conversation about what those impacts would be to the CBOs. Or we could also choose to do the same thing, but.
Okay, great, thank you. Julius and Rebecca and everybody, if you want to just send me those numbers later, I don't want to hold up the works. I'm done.
I'm sorry, I stopped looking because so I do have 120%. One bedroom is 3,329 and a low income is 1,816. So it's between there.
Did you say one bedroom was 3,000?
A one bedroom moderate, which is the 120% AMI. What you're trying to get is the 100% median, which is just a little below that. So yes, the one bedroom 120% is 3,329 at a moderate.
Daisy.
Yes. So it would be less than that, but it would be more than 1,800.
Okay. So that just, I just want to kind of put that in perspective in our local housing market, what it takes to rent. I just think that's incredible. Easily over $3,000 a month just in rent. That's, anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, so before I turn this over to the public for any public comment, I'll ask Edith if there's any other remarks you'd like to give.
After public comment would be fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so at this time, I'll look towards our members of our public to see if there's anyone wishing to address us on this item. I don't see anybody on their phone, but I will let anyone know who's listening that if you ever attend our meetings via phone, all you have to do is hit *9 and that will raise your virtual hand. And while we're waiting to see if anybody wants to speak, I will take one thing away. Julius gave me something to think about as far as working towards getting more of a collaborative approach. You know, I've said multiple times to many audiences that we can't do it alone. We all have the same problems, but we're all trying to do it a different way. And if we could just work collaboratively, we'd be able to address the problem a little bit better. So Julius, you've given me some more impetus to really try and work more collaboratively with other cities to see if we can get this problem solved by working together. So I do see one hand going up. Rocky Garcia.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for the workshop. We've attended a couple of these, and they're very, very informative to us. A couple of things that I've written to you before is the quote, affordability by design. We have a rental project downtown, as you know, and I know that the staff is counting that as under the moderate rate income level. And I know from a very practical matter, there are people in there are renters in there that are below that income wise. And I think we need to do actual rents and actual sales prices rather than be determinative, if that's a word, sorry, and call it just moderate, everything moderate. I know it might take a little more of staff's time to do that, but especially with things like ADUs, they're definitely not moderate when you compare them to, you know, they're 700, 800, 900 square feet, and a rental unit that we would have at that same rate at the same square footage would be renting and low. So I think that we'd like to sit down and talk about that. I've met up in Sacramento with the housing department up there, and they were very, very much encouraging me to talk about affordable by design, because there's a variety of things that can happen, most especially, you know, smaller units that we were talking about. In our case, in New Horizons, we're going to be doing and selling smaller condominiums, 1, 2, and some 3-bedroom units in there. And those would be under the moderate requirement. However, what I think is honestly going to happen is we will be below, some will be below that, especially if it's a single person buying a 1-bedroom unit. So I think that there should be some good discussion about that. And I know that myself and any of the other builders would be more than happy to work with staff on, again, on the ADUs, let's count those. And, you know, in our case, the senior housing project, to get those counted in their proper category without putting an onerous deed restriction on it. Again, just to kind of finish up, I thank you very much for letting me talk at this workshop. They've been very good, very, very informative. Unfortunately, the state does do things that we don't like them to do, but we as builders will follow what the rules are and what your rules are. Again, I just ask if we can work together and meet those goals so that the state does not impede our progress. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I see no other hands going up, so I will go ahead and close public comment, and I will turn this over to Ms. Ramirez.
I see we have a couple of hands up, so I don't know if there's follow-up from Councilmember McKay and Jennifer Carmen and Councilmember Beltran.
Jennifer, why don't you go ahead and go?
Sure. I do just want to note that in relation to the comments about collaboration, the Cities Association is sponsored a planning collaborative for all the cities in the county. And so all the planning directors are working together on issues related to housing element, housing production. And so we already have that starting to coalesce. And we may end up having a group as the county being able to go together with some of the issues. Namely, one of the ones that affects us the most is the definition of transit, especially related to our train. And every time we talk to a lobbyist or an assemblyman or a senator, there needs to be a service level attached to the transit definition that accounts for actual service, not the service that we currently have. And a lot of the rebuts that we get are the chicken and the egg. If you build it, they will come. And that's wonderful, except when you build it, you got to provide the cars or parking for cars before you get that train service. So that is still an issue that everyone is struggling with, not just us, but I think we're hit hardest. And as well as Gilroy out of most of the cities in the county. So thank you.
Okay, it's a workshop, guys.
Oh.
So, John, your hand was up first, and then Yvonne.
Yeah, well, just real quickly, you know, I really hear Councilmember Spring, Councilmember Board, well, everybody. If I could ask for us to either set some time aside at the next workshop, housing workshop, or maybe some time in the future, for us to actually bring ideas on how we can have an impactful voice in Sacramento. We all have different resources. We all have, you know, all these different avenues of trying to get things done. So maybe we can collectively sit for a period of time together and talk about how we would approach Sacramento effectively. And I think that, you know, I don't know if there are any tricks left in the bag for staff. Maybe those of us who are in contact with other cities on a regular basis and all that, maybe we can have that conversation. So maybe that's something that we as a council can own and start to say, okay, we want to do something. Here are the resources we bring. Let's try this, because I keep on hearing, let's try something out of the box. So let's do that. Let's do that ourselves. Thank you.
Can I go ahead? Or that's fine. I just wanted to comment a little bit on the affordable by design. And I know that Frank Fuller was talking about this on our diversity and inclusion, you know, so there's been lots of chatter about that since last week. And I think, yes, there's some possibilities in there, but I also think on the level of equity, we don't want, that's part of what we have with the BMR program, is you have these homes that are equal sizing for where you have lower income families that are able to live in a home. There would never be a possibility, because they are a bigger family rather than some, you know, living in squished in these boxes. I've lived in New York, I've lived in San Francisco, I've lived in downtown San Diego. So you know, the affordable by design is great in theory. Again, you know, in planning period, it is a great idea and can work in some instances, I think. But there's also I mean, you have very small designed units that are incredibly expensive. And so housing is something that people need no matter what the price is. And so that's a danger that I want us to be cognizant about. And when we're talking about equity, who is then living in the 4,000, 5,000 square foot single family home, and who is then living in the affordable by design, tiny microscopic home with no yard or area for young children to run around in. So, you know, those are just things to think about. It doesn't mean that, like I said, there are certain areas that it could work for certain groups, but we need to look at who's having the hard time. If you don't have a parent that you can go to and say, hey, I need some help with the down payment, you know, who are the people that we're trying to help get in here? Families, young professionals, those are, you know, our service industry, all of those jobs that are the engine to our city. So I think I just want to make sure that we're thinking about that holistically. Thank you.
Rebecca?
Yes, I just have two last comments. I know we're almost out of time. One is important to note that we're actually almost at 1 in 9 homes is affordable. Edith recently asked, we've been saying 1 in 8 for a long time. Can you double check that? So it's climbing up there. And secondly, I will I wholeheartedly understand wanting to change the perception around the term affordable housing. I'm going to ask for your help in changing that perception. We're very busy building the housing and doing lots of other things. And so I realize that some people take offense with the term extremely low income, low income. I don't love those terms either, but have not thought of anything better. But we can start using income-driven housing. But more importantly than the term, people will always find an opportunity to view it as something negative. So I need your help in changing that perception, because it really is so many people, so much of our workforce. So that's all, Bree.
All right, Edith.
Sure, thank you. And I'm going to try to be super concise so we can give our city clerk the ability to transfer to the city council meeting. I appreciate the time today, council, for the workshop. What I love the most is that no time did the council have any concerns about our commitment to providing homes that are affordable so that our families and our workforce can live here. I agree with Rebecca. I think that one of the things that we as team, as staff can use from you is helping us with the education on the fact that these homes are for all of us, that there is not a need to be so fearful about that. We hear you loud and clear that there is a need to continue to think through creative ways to express our voice at the state and be influential without getting us in trouble, right? Without putting the city in fiscal legal liability, but somehow influencing and educating our state. So we're going to be thinking about that. We are going to continue to think about how do we talk about these housing units, whether it's income driven or something else. Love that conversation. On the conversation of the ADUs, super quickly, we recognize that they're part of the inventory and they play a role, but they are also require a bigger conversation to think about how they fit and if they fit in the income restricted category, because it provides programmatic and legal challenges for us. And in addition to that, they don't really meet the big picture goals of the kind of housing that we've been so good at creating. Like you said, Councilmember Beltran, making sure that everybody has access to the same type of home. And so therefore, again, ADUs are great, but they need to be thought about. We'll be coming back to you sooner than later on this whole conversation on the inclusionary housing ordinance. And there we can take a deeper dive into this issue. Again, as Rebecca said, your comments, we're taking them to heart and now rethinking if we can be even more creative with the program so that we can shape it in a way that can give us more local control. At a minimum, get ourselves out of SB 335, right? And that came from your conversations. We look forward to more conversations at the next workshop. The focus is going to be on the implications to infrastructure and how are we as a city planning to continue to provide for water, sewer, roads, especially with all this housing and that is coming taller and denser in certain areas of the city. With that, Mr. Mayor, I hand it back to you and thank you for the conversation tonight.
All right, well, I want to thank my colleagues and staff and the members of the public for attending tonight's workshop. Very informative and daunting task we have ahead of us. So again, I really appreciate it. And with that, why don't we go ahead and adjourn until 7:05 and then come back. We'll give the city clerk an opportunity or time to recalibrate and get us ready for our council meeting. So we'll come back, we'll reconvene at 7:05.
Thank you.